All right, so this lesson is going to be on special populations or special needs students and accommodations and modifications. I'll have another lesson over uh, kind of some similar things, but more of engagement strategies for special populations in ag education classrooms. So this is really just accommodations and modifications and what they are and why they're needed. All right, so our objectives are to identify different types of special needs, explain the difference between an accommodation and modification, and then list 3 modifications and 3 accommodations. All right, so types of special needs. There's autism, deaf and blindness, deafness, um, emotional disturbance, hearing impaired, and intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairments, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injuries, visual impairment, that includes blindness. So all these are just different types of special needs. So really we're just looking at the population that may be in a classroom that has some sort of issue that might prevent them from being able to learn in a standard lesson or standard classroom. And so that's not necessarily just learning disabilities, but like I said, it can be health impairments or orthopedic impairment, some sort of physical impairment as well as mental impairment. So you got to keep all those things in mind. If you have a student with a broken arm, they're right-handed and their right arm is broken, so they can't use their right hand to write with. You're going to have to make some sort of accommodation modification for them to be able to partake in your lessons. And so all those things kind of go into this. It's not just what we think of as special education students, but anybody who might have some sort of special need while in the classroom. So accommodations modifications are designed for instructional success. So it's to help students be able to successfully navigate the classroom and be successful in their own personal learning. All right, so accommodations are simply supports. You have the same success criteria, you have the same expectations of all students, but it's a support to help them get to the same point. So not every student's going to need an accommodation, but some students will need accommodations. And so they still have the same success criteria. They still have to be able to perform the same things as anybody else in the class, but you might provide some sort of support system to help them get there that other students may not necessarily need. All right, so this could include things like preferential seating. So they get to decide where they sit or, move them to the front of the class, something like that. Use of headphones to reduce distraction. So maybe they're easily distracted, but you can give them some headphones, they can listen to music, and that helps them stay focused. Maybe they just need more time for the assignment. It's not that they can't do it, they just can't do it as fast as others. Or they may need assignments broken into smaller chunks. They may need to scribe or color overlays, a test reader, so some sort of help to get them to be able to perform the task. And these are all very common in a lot of different classrooms for a lot of different students across the board. And so it's just an accommodation to help them do the prescribed assignment or task or activity. So a modification then are techniques used to allow students to get to the same success levels, but you may have to change the curriculum or the content. So we still want these students to be successful, but they can't actually do what some of the other students are doing, and so we have to modify what we're doing, modify the lesson, the curriculum, the content, to put forth a lesson that will be something that student is capable of doing. All right, so modifications might be they have a different rubric. So they still do the same assignment, but we don't grade them the same. We give them a different rubric that has a little bit different criteria for success. Maybe we omit essay questions because we know they can't do essay questions, so we don't give them that. Provide less choices on multiple choice. So typically you provide 4 choices, you might do 3 or just 2 choices on multiple choice questions. Provide copies of notes. Reduce the written assignments. Participation only. Are they expected to master 70% of the content, not more? So things that modify. This could also include rather than them partaking in an entire lesson, they only focus on the very fundamental components of that lesson, and they may revisit that lesson, that fundamental component, several times while you move on with other students, and you just have them focus on those fundamentals and those basic components of what it is that you're trying to teach. All right, some legal issues. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act basically says that individuals with disabilities have a right to learn and be involved in education and implemented in the same standard classrooms as anybody else. There's the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, Americans with Disabilities Act. You've probably heard of this one. People talk about ADA compliance all the time. That just says that facilities need to be in such a condition and have the proper components that anybody with a disability can still access those facilities. And so any public building has to have, for instance, a ramp, so that ramp or a lift so that people in wheelchairs can still get into those classrooms. And those ramps, if you have a ramp, there's specific criteria for what that ramp's supposed to be, like how long it is and the grade of the ramp and whatnot. But there has to be some sort of access. It even goes to the types of handles on doors. You can't have the knob handles. You have to have the hook handles so that you can basically just kind of press down on it and still open a door. And so that actually is if it's a public building, then you have to follow those laws. And if you've been in our Ag Ed and Comm building, you know that we have 2 floors and no way to access the second floor. Well, that's finally being addressed by the university, and a elevator is being put into the building there at Texas Tech Ag Ed and Comm. And so anybody and everybody will be able to access the second floor of the building now. We've not ever really had much of an issue with that. Not too many people in wheelchairs have come through our building, but we have had a couple over the years, and they haven't been able to be in classes on the second floor. And so if they'd been upset about that, then that could cause some major problems for the department and the university. But that shouldn't be an issue anymore. There's the Family Educational Privacy Rights Act, FERPA. That basically gets to the point where we can't share information about a student with anybody other than that student and their parents. There's a lot more to that, but that's the basic thing is, who can you share educational information with? It's with the student and with his parents. That's basically it. On the college level, what that means is we can share educational information with the student only. So if your parents try to call me and get information about your grades or what you're doing in class, I'm not going to talk to them because I can't. Because I can only talk to you. You're the only person that I can give that educational information to outside of the faculty and staff of our department and the university. Of course, there's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, now the No Child Left Behind Act. That was an effort to make sure that every child is educated and educated at the same levels across the board, and was actually introduced by George Bush. And so those are, like I said, I'm not going into a whole lot of detail on any of these, but definitely some things to look up and learn about as you move through your educational careers. But that's kind of the main lessons on modifications and accommodations. Again, I'm going to come back to these 2 slides just to reinforce that accommodations are simply supports. So they are still doing everything that anybody else in the class is doing, but you are going to provide them with something along the lines of preferential seating or use of headphones or some sort of accommodation that helps them to achieve the level of success that everybody else is being expected of in that classroom. Whereas a modification, again, changes what's being taught for that specific student. So it may be a shortened version of the lesson, or graded, or the assignments are graded differently or have different questions. That make it easier for that student. So again, accommodations provide support, modifications change the content. That's important to know as you move forward with accommodations and modifications. If you've taken exam 1, you've seen how I've asked some questions on learning theories. There will be some questions on accommodation modifications that are similar, written similar to those on learning theories. So understand the fundamental basis behind accommodations and modifications. Does it help the student achieve the standard level of success that's expected of everybody in the class, or does it change the lesson, the content, or the assignment to fit the capabilities of that student? All right, and that's all I have for accommodations and modifications.